Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. This is Ukraine War news update for the 27th of October 2023. Welcome, good morning to you. It's morning my time for tea. Although there have been scientific journals written presenting evidence to show very conclusively that it's always time for tea from like 0 o'clock to 24 o'clock. Fact. Coffee drinkers out there, you're all wrong uns. You might not like to hear that, but it's true. That I can present you with plenty of scientific evidence to suggest this is also true. Hashtag T wins. Right, we go to military aid. Shut up, Piers. Whatever. So we have an American package that, as I announced yesterday, includes the usual kind of keep it ticking along in terms of ammunition, $150 million package. We are in a period of the lowest amount of aid assistance from the US to Ukraine, and that might have, as I said, a lot to do with what's happened in the House of Representatives with not having a speaker, not being able to get stuff through, but also it could be cooling off. It could be that Israel has taken a lot of the bandwidth away from the Ukraine war. But this package includes NASAMS and HIMARS ammunition, AIM-9Ms, Stingers, 155mm and 105mm artillery shells, tow missiles, Javelin, 2 million cartridges for small arms, night vision devices, explosive ammo for clearing obstacles, and more. So a whole bunch of really necessary stuff there. None of your big ticket items. There could be ATACMs thrown in there. You just don't know how they are advertising or communicating these things. Anyway, moving on. Denmark will provide. Well done, America. That's awesome. Obviously, Denmark will provide Ukraine with military equipment. It's like the US is sitting there in the White House. It's like John Kirby sitting there going, "Oh, what?" Jonathan MS Pearce has said, "Well done." Oh, brilliant. Oh, guys, everyone. Well done, us. We're getting plaudits from across the pond. Brilliant. Like they give a damn. Denmark will provide Ukraine with military equipment worth $522 million. This is brilliant, especially given Denmark's size in comparison to, say, places like the US. If you do it as a percentage of GDP, per capita, all these kind of ways of measuring this stuff, this is a huge package. I don't know if it's what had previously been announced. There's lots of confusion at the moment as to what is actually genuinely newly announced stuff, what is being communicated in a different way, or whether it's going from pledged to delivered. All these kind of things, you quite often end up repeating claims or packages that have been announced previously. Anyway, this includes tanks, IFVs, infantry fighting vehicles, artillery ammunition, drones, and small arms. Really, really great from Denmark there. German Defense Minister Pistorius and Ukrainian Defense Minister Umarov have discussed further military assistance over the last 24 hours, reported by the German MOD. That's great. Hopefully something comes of that. Germany really are up there with the US as the biggest providers of assistance. In fact, so much so that I was listening to Ukraine the latest podcast yesterday, Daily Telegraph, very pro-conservative party, as a newspaper. They were talking about how there are some criticisms. In fact, it was a Labour defence, the shadow defence minister or secretary. So he's not in government and he's the opposition party, but calling out the UK government for cooling down on its support for Ukraine and wondering where it's gone and what's happening. So that is great. I think Labour is brilliant because Ukraine is so high on my agenda that's brilliant. Call out the UK government, even if they had been doing plenty of stuff, still call them out more. Hopefully that's the right kind of messaging from Labour. The great thing about UK politics is that there's massive bipartisan support for Ukraine. And if there is a change in government, which looks incredibly likely, given the polling and given by-election results and record swings from Conservative to Labour, if that happens, there will be no issue with support for Ukraine as far as I can work out. And that seems to be, the Ukrainians have been over here, politicians have been over here, both conferences, the Tory conference and Labour conference, and they seem to be happy with bipartisan support. So that's really good news. Sticking to UK support, Britain trains Ukraine to resist Putin's big freeze. This is from the Telegraph. Royal Engineers help Kyiv protect vital infrastructure from long-range Russian attacks during the cold season. Royal Engineers are our army engineers. So Britain's Royal Engineers will train forces to protect vital energy infrastructure from long-range Russian attacks. The 2-week course will help Ukrainian engineers better plan their defences as they try to safeguard civilians from anticipated attempts by Moscow to freeze the war-torn country into submission. Grant Shapps, the Defence Secretary, said, quote, "It is essential that Ukraine receives the support it urgently needs throughout the winter as its civilian population faces mortal danger on a daily basis from Putin's forces and their indiscriminate campaign of bombardment against its critical infrastructure." Grant Shapps is an interesting one. He's not particularly highly revered or respected within politics in the UK, even by a lot of conservative voters. Not greatly popular. However, he's an interesting choice for Defence Secretary because even though Ben Wallace had military experience, so he's a military man and was a right choice for that job, Grant Shapps is not a military man. But in terms of Ukraine, he's of Polish descent. Shapps, I think the surname is got its roots in Poland, and he has had a Ukrainian family living with him, put his money where his mouth is, and has done a really good job there. And so there is a personal connection to Ukraine, which actually counts for quite a lot in that kind of position, I think. So credit where credit's due and all that. The drills will build on previous, did I finish saying? Yes, the drills will build on previous techniques taught to Ukrainian volunteers, including how to use sandbags for maximum defensive effectiveness and constructing trenches. Kyiv's troops will learn how to negate the impact of different Russian weapons and how to create physical and aerial barriers to protect infrastructure from Moscow's attacks. The training will be hosted at a gasworks, military airstrip and a port facility in the UK. As part of the overall package of assistance for Kyiv, Britain is on track to have trained 37,000 Ukrainian recruits, including Marines and tank operators, by the end of next year as part of Operation Interflex, the codename for the training mission. That's brilliant. I think the UK have done a great job there. Quote, "There is no doubt the training will be implemented in Ukraine in the coming weeks and have a real-life impact on the quality of life of its civilians and the ability for Ukraine to resist Russian attacks throughout the winter," said Major Michael Suddaby from 63 Works Group Royal Engineers. Good stuff. Excellent. We could read the rest of that, but you get the idea. Happy with that. Great Britain, to remain with the UK, has signed new contracts to provide Ukraine with air defence systems. The General Staff of Armed Forces of Ukraine has said. The United Kingdom, along with other allies, is also donating an additional $100 million or pounds, so that's more than $100 million worth of demining equipment. A new aid package will be delivered in the coming months. Again, not sure whether this is one that's already been announced previously. I think it has. So anyway, this is the Terror Hawk. Is it? Yeah, the complex that is a kind of almost a pallet complex on the back of a truck, and get then. Well, I guess you could use it from the back of the truck as a mobile unit, but then plonk it down and use it as a static air defense system where it is, I'm not sure if it's 100% autonomous or whether it's remotely controllable from some distance off. But anyway, or might be a mixture of both in different ways. So in January, Ukraine is to receive a new missile with a range of 300 kilometers and a warhead of 100 kilograms. I don't know what the details are here, but I would like to know. So this was reported by Voice of America journalists with reference to an official of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Quote, "We plan to help re-equip Buk." So Buk are these old Soviet-era air defense systems that they have been able to, because they've run out of, or they're running out of Soviet-era ammunition for them, they've rejigged the RIM-7, the Sea Sparrow missiles, which are anti-aircraft missiles fired from ships, and they've rejigged them to be able to be used on these Buks. Now, that's great because there are some obsolete stocks of these around the world. Canada, I think, has given a bunch. Germany had a ship that was it came to the end of its life and had a bunch of those missiles that they're able to get to Ukraine, as far as I understand it. So that's good news. Now, if they are talking about repurposing a book to become a surface-to-surface missile system, firing a missile with a range of 300 kilometers and a warhead of 100 kilograms, then that's pretty cool too. Yeah, I'd love to know more details about that, because that is indigenous production of a missile that could also be shot into Russia, and that's the key. Like at the moment, Ukraine are hamstrung because allied nations are saying, "Yeah, we're going to give you this stuff, but you can't fire it into Russia." But hang on, they're firing stuff from Russia to us, and you're saying we can't hit that stuff. Yeah, no, you're not allowed to. I mean, that's bonkers, and I don't agree with that. But you can kind of understand the rationale and the not wanting it to be escalatory and giving these missiles to Ukraine and then them firing them into Russia, etc., etc. But if they can make these missiles themselves, then there's nothing stopping them doing that, and that will allow them to properly protect their own nation in hitting these installations inside Russian territories, if they can reach within 300 kilometers. Depends where the Russians had their stuff, of course. Anyway, moving on, Soviet fighter jets were put up for sale in Kazakhstan. I want to know more about this as well. More than 100 Soviet-made fighters and bombers, allegedly unserviceable, and aircraft engines have been put up for sale in Kazakhstan. Now, I wonder whether you'll have a bidding war between Russia and Ukraine. I don't know what Russia has in terms of stockpiled airframes for spare parts. They probably have quite a lot, to be honest, especially when we're talking about serviced aircraft, or the servicing of their aircraft being such a challenge for them and flying so many flight hours. They're probably going to have a number of aircraft that are too dangerous to fly but can be used for spare parts. They might not have as much need as the Ukrainians, who would definitely want to get their hands on MiG-31, MiG-27, MiG-29, Su-24s, even if they are unflyable, just because they'll be so useful for the Ukrainians for spare parts. But these will be the older variants of the planes, 1970s and 80s. In the published reports, says P*11, it is noted that, quote, the evaluated objects are in an unusable condition due to moral obsolescence. Interesting term. Their modernization is economically impractical. And that, I'd imagine, is the case. But I would still think they do have use for the Ukrainians. Yeah, and wouldn't it be great if, I love the word allegedly unserviceable, in that there might be the odd airframe that's perfectly usable, but maybe this is a way of Kazakhstan supplying Ukraine with fighter bombers or something, but saying, hey, look, we just put them up for sale. Maybe someone else buys them, gets them to Ukraine. Ukraine get unserviceable fighter bombers or something like that, like Su-24 would be nice. Su-24M fly these missions with cruise missiles. They are actually, in reality, some of them are perfectly flyable. But that's Kazakhstan's way of being able to get some money in, possibly, but also get some airframes from Kazakhstan to Ukraine without Russia going mental. I don't know. Interesting. Right. Russia is increasing production capacity at military factories across the country. Russia is actively increasing production capacity across the country, according to journalists at RFE and RL, as they've reported yesterday through analysis of satellite images. Well, actually, this comes from you can see it on Twitter with a series of threads from this particular handle. I don't know what that says in English, but anyway, Russia is building new military factories all over the country. Investigative journalists from Schemes discovered the details, analyzing satellite photos. Now, this is actually in that looks like Radio Free Europe, doesn't it? As the icon there, the logo. In 3 shifts, how Russia is building up military factories across the country. Satellite view. So this is a Google translation of the article. I'm not going to go through it in total here, but Analysis of satellite images indicates that Russia is actively increasing production capacity at its military plants. We are talking about enterprises that produce and repair tactical and strategic aircraft, combat helicopters, as well as assemble military drones and guided munitions. It was at such factories that Schemes, Radio Liberty, yes, there you go, saw noticeable changes. The satellite recorded the development of a number of military and dual-use enterprises, the emergence of new hangars and workshops. So Kazan Aviation Plant has got, I'll just give you an example of this kind of work that these guys have done. This is an aircraft plant from the structure of the state enterprise Rostec, located near the civil airport Borisoglebuskoye in Kazan. It is used to build and repair not only civilian aircraft, but also strategic bombers from which Russia launches missiles at Ukraine. This year, a new large hangar was erected on the territory of the plant. It consists of 2 combined buildings where a workshop is located. For the first time, journalists drew attention to footage of this in the story from Russia 1 TV channel and talked about the visit of Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin to this enterprise, June 23. Schemes track the process of erecting this hangar on the territory of the plant using satellite images from Maxar and Planet Labs. The first construction work began back in 2018, but it was in 2022 that construction accelerated. And this year, according to satellite photos, it was almost completed. The new hangar is 300 meters long, so on and so forth. You get the idea. So they look at a bunch of these places. Irkutsk aviation plants. I know Irkutsk well myself from Games of Risk. Irkutsk aviation plants. Ural civil aviation plants, and Dubna machine building plants, and Kronstadt. Then finally a conclusion that Russia is preparing for a long war. So the idea that they are upgrading all these facilities implies that the production is increasing at these plants, and they're able to at least repair and possibly build a whole lot of stuff that they were previously unable to. So this is, I think, pretty significant and a blow for the Ukrainians in terms of hoping that the Russian military capability and capacity will be adversely affected by sanctions and by the war effort itself. It could be that Russia has found a way around some or all of these issues. But yes, something to keep an eye on there. Italian tech giant, in a similar kind of context here, Camozzi fix with Russia supply chain hints at military collaborations. There are indications Camozzi has maintained dealings in Russia with sanctioned companies directly involved in the war in Ukraine, despite international pressure. This is really frustrating, where you've got European, American, Canadian, allied nations have some of their free market enterprises, corporate enterprises, still putting dollars in their pockets by doing deals with the moral monster that is the Kremlin, and supplying components that allow the Kremlin to make these weapons that are used against the Ukrainians. And it would be great if that can be stopped, of course. Right, moving on to geopolitical subjects now. This is another one of those stories that I think is massively significant and I think deserves a lot more thought and a lot more coverage. Right, EU leaders plan to discuss use of frozen Russian assets at a 2-day summit. This is why I have put this one first. Sanctioned Russian assets frozen in Belgium. This is just the sanctioned Belgian frozen assets. Have generated almost 3 billion euros in profits. So since they've been frozen, maybe a year and a half, I don't know when these ones are frozen, they've generated $3 billion worth of profits, or euros of profits, right? So what's going to happen with those 3 billion euros? That's frozen profits. Well, the profits aren't frozen, as in those assets are generating income still. It's just that the Russians can't access that. Bloody hell. That's $3 billion. That's a $3 billion assistance package to Ukraine waiting to happen. This is brilliant. Like, how many frozen assets around the world are generating profits still, generating income? not just about liquidating those assets. Maybe you can just keep them frozen and say, do the whole reparations thing. Say, right, here's say we've got $10 billion worth of assets, like I've talked about before. We're going to freeze these. We're not going to turn them into cash and give that cash to Ukraine because it's possibly a little bit legally problematic and I'm not sure what's going on. But we're going to freeze them, and we're going to freeze them until you give Ukraine $10 billion worth of reparation, right? Then after the war is over, Russia then give $10 billion worth of reparations to Ukraine, and then whatever country it is that has those frozen assets gives them back to Russia. Okay, brilliant. So the net result is Ukraine still gets $10 billion. But while those frozen assets are sitting there, if they've generated $3 billion this year, then that $3 billion, you can just use this as a cash cow to supply aid to Ukraine. This is like a no-brainer for me. If you can sort the legal aspects of this out, then goodness me, this is brilliant. According to the newspaper, the EU plans to introduce a tax on windfall profits received from frozen Russian assets. Yes, this profit is then to be used for the restoration of Ukraine. Yes, 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 and a whole lot of yes. Great stuff. Ukraine is to start negotiations on joining the EU as early as December. This was stated by the Minister of European Integration of Ukraine, Ola Stefanishnya. Ukraine, quote, Ukraine has created all the necessary conditions for this by implementing the 7 recommendations, she says. Fantastic news. Staying on the EU, however, and this is where I start getting angry again. Please hold me back if I'm in a room with Viktor Orban and Robert Fico. Right. Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, who's a staunch supporter of Ukraine, tells reporters in Brussels that Hungary is, quote, becoming a problem we have to address. We've had different opinions before, but managed to keep unity, but it's getting more difficult, she said, admitting we don't really have strong tools to counter Orban. This is such an important point. I've talked about this before. EU has great tools for getting into the EU, but it doesn't really have the tools for kind of exiling countries from the EU. If you want to voluntarily take yourself out, like the UK, then there are procedures and processes to go through. Okay, it's difficult enough, and it takes years. From personal experience. But as far as getting someone out, there's no way of doing it at the moment. Now there needs to be a way to threaten Hungary. The EU need to properly say to Hungary, no, because they are becoming an issue, and they're taking Slovakia with them. And you might start getting a bloc within a bloc, like a Balkan EU, but actually pro-Russian bloc. And Russia will be freaking loving this. They will be piling money into. If you're talking about return on investment, right? Russia are not getting that from this war they're having with Ukraine. This is an absolute disaster economically speaking. But as far as geopolitical chess goes, I've talked before about disinformation and social media and stuff like that, where you've got troll farms. You're paying people to sit all day and troll threads like mine and try and disrupt the information space and disinform people about elections and so on. That's a good return on investment. Relatively cheap, really good outcomes. Paying bloody Orban and Fico through mechanisms of money going into those countries to do what they're doing now, and we'll just go on to this, is a massive return on investment. If Russia can help disrupt the EU, as I've said before, the EU is the biggest challenge to Russia. Yes, you can talk about the US, but it's not. US is not geographically close. But the EU is a much bigger, localized threat that can, and given that it takes oil and gas and all sorts, or typically has done, from Russia, the EU changing things is much bigger than the US changing things. So the EU is a bigger concern for Putin than the US, and it's been that way for some time. And Putin is doing everything he can to upset the apple cart, which is why, as I said to you previously, this isn't a kind of anti-Brexit thing. But as I said to my dad in 2016, look who really wants Brexit to happen. Who are your mates? Trump and Putin. Right? Putin really, really wanted Brexit to work. Why? Because it's in the best interest of Russia. It's not in the best interest of the unity of Europe. And I look at things not from a British point of view, but from a global point of view. I'm more interested in global solutions to global problems, and that's part of the reason why I was a big fan of the UK remaining in the EU. Now, when you've got Putin drooling at the prospect of Brexit, I'm worried, right? So Putin absolutely wants Orban and Fico to be doing stuff like this, and will undoubtedly be paying them in some way to do this, whether it be in like hydrocarbon deals, energy, whether it be in this or that, I don't know. There will be money and influence coming from the Kremlin directly to Hungary and Slovakia. Orban wants the delegation of Ukraine to come to the negotiations on lifting the veto on EU military aid for $500 million dollars or euros. We are waiting for the arrival of the Ukrainian delegation to Budapest for negotiations on this matter. We are open and ready to negotiate, Orban said. Just everything that Hungary is about putting a spanner in the works for assistance to Ukraine. Hungary, Slovakia opposed the EU's $52 billion allocation to Ukraine, says Politico. Hungarian Prime Minister Orban and Slovakian Prime Minister Fico refused to allocate aid for Ukraine, arguing that, quote, EU support is not working and citing concerns about corruption. These are just Russian talking points. It's so frustrating that Fico got into power in Slovakia, and I bloody hope it all goes wrong for them. No, I don't hope it goes wrong for the people of Slovakia, but man, just frustrates the heck out of me that this guy's in charge and is now becoming an Orban number 2. Lithuania will ban all Russian gas imports at all facilities in the country starting in November, according to LRT. Good. Thanks for the Baltics. Quote, Russian gas was delivered to the regasification facilities in Lithuania by tankers from Poland, Deputy Energy Minister Inga Zalina said. As a reminder, Russian gas imports to Lithuania via pipelines have been suspended since April 2022. Quote, Biden faces, this is from Shashank Joshi, quoting Washington Post, Biden faces mounting pressure to strike Iranian proxies that have repeatedly attacked injured US troops in Iraq and Syria, but he is weighing any decision to retaliate against his broader concern that the war in Gaza should be on the precipice. I mentioned this in my last video this morning, that there could be, the reason this is included here is because there could be ramifications for Ukraine. So if the US starts hitting production facilities for munitions, Iranian production facilities, then that's what they mean by Iranian proxies in Syria, then that might have an effect on the provision of weapons to Russia that would assist Russia in fighting against Ukraine. And then if that expands to disruption of facilities within Iran, then this will also be beneficial to Ukraine. So this is, I think, important and something to keep an eye on for sure. Russian propagandists might be prudent to wait before celebrating Speaker Johnson's past opposition to Ukrainian aid. It still enjoys commanding bipartisan support in both chambers. While this is correct, right, so while the House of Representatives and the Senate do broadly support support and aid to Ukraine on a continuing basis, there is a chipping away at that bipartisan support. And when you look at the Democrats, 100% of them support it. When you look at Republicans, 50% of Republicans. So there's bipartisan support that might look like 75% across the House or across the Senate. And you might think that's great, 75% support. But when you look at individual parties, that's only 50% for the Republicans. And that is a worry. Now, Johnson, the new speaker, is a spanner in the works in terms of, so he supported the Lend-Lease initially, but has then gone into opposition to it and has not supported packages to Ukraine subsequently. So this is a worry. Now, I'm possibly going to do a live stream with Darian Gerdes, Professor Gerdes, his channel, about this whole situation. Now, my view is rather like, who was talking about this? I can't remember, but there's this idea that it might have been on Ukraine the latest. I don't know. This idea that this guy speaks in a very calm voice, and because of the way he speaks, people think, oh, he's more moderate, more he's more sensible, and we've now got a proper politician in place. But that can belie the same kind of policies and thoughts that someone like Jim Jordan or Trump have had, right? So he's no different than the people who were not, Jim Jordan and others who were not allowed into that position, not voted into that position. So be wary that he might sound moderate, like physically sound moderate, but he's not. Although he is saying some pretty sensible things, I think this is fairly acceptable. But the old transparency kind of claims are possibly a guise for not allowing support to go through. But listen to what he says here.
Can't allow Vladimir Putin to prevail in Ukraine because I don't believe it would stop there.
True.
It would probably encourage and empower China to
True.
perhaps make a move on Taiwan. We have these concerns.
Yep.
We're not going to abandon them, but we have a responsibility, a stewardship responsibility over the precious treasure of the American people. And we have to make sure that the White House is providing the people with some accountability for the dollars.
So that is true, and that sounds good, and I would agree with that in principle. So A, Putin, bad guy, need to stop him. But B, we need to be accountable to our taxpayers for what we are sending, which in principle there's nothing to disagree with there. But that's been the talking point of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene. That's exactly what they've said when they are arguing for not sending Ukraine. So actually, they give the headline of we want accountability, but actually, we just don't want to give money at all, and that's how we're selling it. So I'd be wary of that. And in fact, he's now come out and said that funding to support Ukraine and Israel should be handled separately. The only reason you would say you want to handle it separately is if you want to give the assistance to Israel, but don't want to give it to Ukraine. That's the only reason. Otherwise, it's just like, yeah, we support both. Let's do it. The only reason you want to split that back out, because the reason Biden put it in together is so that it was more likely that both would get through on the back of Israel. So you'd only want to separate that if you didn't want Ukraine support to get through. For him saying he wants to separate it is him essentially saying he doesn't want to give aid to Ukraine. But this is a worry. Be wary of this guy. You might think, oh yeah, sensible guy, no problem, he'll make the right decision. I'm not so sure. And that's not just my biases, that's just trying to understand why people say what they do. Anyway, he wants to split the funding, that $106 billion package, for both countries. It also includes aid to the borders too, like the US borders as well. Right. This is where you understand where Russia's allegiances lie. Hamas delegation visits Moscow. A delegation of the militant group Hamas, which governs Gaza, arrived in Moscow on the 26th, that's yesterday. Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Maria Zakharova, a wonderful person, said without elaborating on the visit details. Yeah, because controversial. Russians, although, you can say, okay, we do need to talk. There does need to be diplomacy. That's true. But it's just like, well, Russia have been funding Hamas effectively, maybe through proxies, maybe through Iran. But it's just, Russia seems to be consistently getting into bed with the wrong bedfellows. And it makes for a really distasteful political orgy. Really smash my metaphors into inappropriateness. Russians will no longer be able to open bank cards en masse in Kazakhstan. I think that means bank accounts. So this is from Nexter. According to the new law, only foreigners who have obtained a temporary residence permit or residence permit will be able to open accounts there. A ban on remote account opening has also been introduced. Thus, Kazakhstan, remember they're also putting their planes up for sale, will cease to be a popular destination for Russians for card tourism after Visa and MasterCard have left Russia. So, or after they leave Russia. So this is the idea that get around loopholes in sanctions and corporations leaving Russia. a lot of Russians go to former Soviet states to try and set up stuff and do things. So this is Kazakhstan saying, no, you're not using us. Again, this is a positioning thing. Like, either they're under pressure from the West, or they are themselves just saying, no, we are going to position ourselves effectively with Ukraine or with sentiments against Russia by putting things in place to make it more difficult for Russians to benefit from us and our economy, so on and so forth. So I think that's good news for Ukraine, and it's very interesting in terms of the geopolitical chessboard of the Eurasian countries. We'll have to, again, keep an eye on that too. Germany arrested a businessman who could sell drone engines to Russia for almost 2 million euros, according to Deutsche Welle, DW. This summer, detectives of the Customs Criminal Investigation confiscated a total of 120 such engines from the company, preventing their transfer to Russia. Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. I mean, it's not brilliant because someone's actually doing that and trying to get around loopholes or break sanctions, but it's great that they're being found out and stuff is being done. So well done to the German authorities there. Alleged war crimes in Kharkiv, Kiev and Odessa must be investigated by Germany after Clooney FDN. So what's Clooney FDN? So George Clooney, famous actor and producer, etc., married Amal Clooney. So Amal Clooney is a human rights lawyer. And getting involved in human rights legal cases here with regard to Ukraine is great. Let's get all entities involved in bringing accountability to the Russians here. And truth hounds, so these are hunting for the truth, chasing perpetrators, protecting the unprotected. So filed 3 cases with German federal prosecutors. Now, I'm yet to understand I haven't read this piece yet, but this is great. You know, you want as many entities and in as many countries as possible, like chipping away legally at Russia for doing what they have done, so that they are, no one's under any illusion. Russia are the bad guys, and they have committed war crimes, and they are going to be brought to account for doing so. Right, thank you very much. Really appreciate all your support. Big love to all of you. Thanks to my members. Thank you. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.